You know Russell Westbrook don't have the temperament to put up with that. Come on, y'all. That ain't who he is.
Stephen A. Smith didn't hold anything back after Russell Westbrook was left stranded in free agency, roasting the former MVP in a way fans called downright ruthless. But here's the catch. His words weren't just for laughs. They hinted at a deeper rift between Westbrook and the league itself. And the real reason Russ remains unsigned might be far uglier than people realize. Let's dive in. The ridicule echoing across the NBA is loud. Russell Westbrook, once the walking triple-double and the unrelenting motor of the NBA, now finds himself stuck in basketball limbo. The man who used to flood highlight reels through pure force of will is, in 2025, jobless, at least in basketball terms. And Stephen A. Smith never want to hold back when calling out NBA chaos, when all in on mocking him. Not with empathy or polite excuses, but with the kind of harsh public critique that grabs headlines and splits fan bases in an instant. This isn't just a tale of one player's downfall. It's about what unfolds when a basketball legend refuses to evolve, when the league he once helped define decides it's ready to move on, and when one of the loudest voices in sports media goes for the jugular. Because the way Stephen A. tore into Westbrook says as much about the NBA system as it does about Brody himself. Let's not stall. Here's how Stephen A. began his verbal assault.
Inexcusable behavior, that's what I saw. And I don't know why this isn't being talked about enough, to be quite honest.
Inexcusable. That's not a word tossed around lightly on national television. For a player of Westbrook's caliber, a former MVP, to be described like that is public humiliation. And Stephen A. didn't stop there. He outright said he believed Westbrook should have been suspended after a reckless playoff performance, branding it appalling and inexcusable. But here's the real shocker. For years, analysts and fans quietly murmured that Russ was a liability, that his game didn't mesh with the modern NBA. Now Stephen A. was saying it loud and clear on the biggest stage in basketball media. He even went a step further, making the chilling prediction that if Westbrook couldn't accept a smaller role, he might actually be out of the league next year. Think about that. From MVP to unemployed, from nightly SportsCenter highlight reels to being laughed at as a free agent nobody wants. So how did it all fall apart? How did the same Russell Westbrook, the man who once averaged a triple-double for 3 straight seasons and forced his way into Hall of Fame talks through sheer determination, end up the punchline of Stephen A.'s critique? To answer that, we have to rewind, because Russ was never supposed to land here. He was the kid who nearly chose Stanford for academics. Basketball was Plan B. This wasn't someone destined solely for the court, but once he got there, he made it personal. And for a while, that fire kept him unstoppable.
Always told me, you need to get a good education. And I was actually thinking about going to Stanford just for academics out of high school.
Teammates, icons, even opponents hailed him as one of the hardest working players they'd ever witnessed. James Harden himself admitted that Westbrook's MVP run might have been the greatest single-season display we've ever seen. Other legends drew parallels between his intensity and Michael Jordan, his relentlessness and Kobe Bryant. But here's the heartbreaking twist. That very same, the unrelenting style that once made him feared is now exactly what the modern NBA has turned against. Teams stopped defending him. Opponents practically dared him to shoot. Colin Cowherd pointed out that Westbrook had become the least guarded guard in the league, with defenses literally backing away and challenging him to pull up. For an average player, that might be ignored. But for a former MVP, that's humiliation, the basketball version of exile. And Stephen A. understood that perfectly. That's why he didn't just critique Russ's performance. He mocked his stubbornness, his refusal to evolve.
Russell Westbrook can't change. He's not going to be a good defender. He hasn't been the last 14 years, and that's not changing.
This wasn't about missed shots. It was about one of the NBA's most notorious flaws, the refusal to adapt. When Russ was younger, his athleticism masked everything. But now, every weakness stands out. Every risky pass, every turnover, every poorly timed leap becomes ammunition for his critics. And those critics didn't stop at his game. Even Russ's name became a punchline. The Westbrook chants got so relentless that his family stopped showing up to games.
Me and my wife was at teacher-parent conference for my son. And the teacher told me, she's like, Noah, he's so proud of his last name. He writes it everywhere. He writes it on everything. He tells everybody, he walks around and says, I'm Westbrook, that's his last name. And I kind of sat there in shock, and it hit me like, damn, like I can no longer allow people, for example, Westbrook to me is now shaming, like it's shaming my name, it's my legacy for my kid.
That's not ordinary heckling. That's psychological warfare. And when Westbrook finally opened up about how much it affected him, fans saw the emotional toll of his downfall. Now, picture sitting at home, already burdened by that pain, then switching on ESPN only to hear Stephen A. saying, "You might not even have a job next season." That's not commentary. That's public execution. And it worked, because we're still discussing it. But here's the real bombshell. Stephen A. didn't stop at Russ. He went after LeBron James, accusing him of fueling the cynicism surrounding Westbrook, even referencing the Houston playoff run, when LeBron's Lakers allegedly mocked Russ as a liability.
LeBron is guilty of that. Remember when Russell Westbrook was in Houston and they were in the playoffs against the Lakers? And LeBron James and the Lakers was talking about he with us, when he had the...
Think about that level of betrayal. One of the greatest players in NBA history, the very man who vouched for Russ to join the Lakers, mocking him behind closed doors. And when things fell apart, he let rumors about swapping him for Kyrie dominate the entire offseason. Now, the question isn't just if Russ deserves another roster spot. It's whether the entire NBA ecosystem, from stars to media to fans, build him up only to break him down. And here's the most brutal irony. What Stephen A. predicted, Russ ending up without a team, could be one of the darkest twists in NBA history. A player who gave everything to basketball, laughed at on national television, ridiculed by crowds, now standing at the brink of irrelevance. The real question isn't whether Westbrook failed. It's whether the NBA failed him. Because here's the thing about Westbrook. He was never meant to be the punchline. When he entered the league, he wasn't hyped like LeBron, wasn't branded the next Jordan, and wasn't gifted the keys to a franchise on draft night. He was raw, undersized for a shooting guard, too chaotic for a point guard. But what he did have was unshakable confidence. That conviction became his trademark, the same single-minded drive that once left UCLA coaches baffled. That relentless drive turned into a Hall of Fame resume. For seasons averaging a triple-double, that's not just stats, that's rewriting basketball's rulebook. Legends like Oscar Robertson had to sit back and watch the impossible become reality. Westbrook wasn't just playing basketball. He was turning defiance into an art form. But here's the cruel twist. The very quality that made Russ great, his refusal to bend or adapt for anyone, is now the weapon analysts like Stephen A. are using against him. Even Magic Johnson put it bluntly. You have to own your stuff. You can't just blame fans, media, or teammates. And for all of Westbrook's fire, accountability has never been his strongest move. Think about how the modern game has evolved. The NBA of 2025 thrives on spacing, efficiency, and three-point shooting. Meanwhile, Stephen A. hammered that very point. Russ has never been a reliable shooter.
This is only about your game. You have not been a good shooter. And a person who has not been a good shooter.
That's not an opinion. That's cold, hard fact. And in a league obsessed with analytics, Westbrook's inefficiency became unforgivable. Once, he could hide it by exploding past offenders. Now, every missed jumper feels like a turnover. But here's where things cut even. Deeper, this isn't just about numbers. It's about perception. When defenders literally sag off you, daring you to shoot, the humiliation echoes louder than any box score. Imagine being a future Hall of Famer and watching opponents treat you as if you're invisible. That's not strategy. That's basketball exile. And Russ felt every bit of it. That's why his frustration spilled into emotional post-game interviews. Like the time he addressed the Westbrook chants. He confessed that the nickname wasn't just aimed at him anymore. It was hurting his family, even his kids.
Can no longer allow people, for example, Westbrook to me is now shaming, like it's shaming my name, it's my legacy for my kids.
That's heartbreaking. We're not talking about missed shots now. We're talking about a man's identity being mocked so publicly that his children couldn't even enjoy their father's career without hearing taunts from the crowd. Yet when Stephen A. had a chance to show empathy, he didn't. He doubled down. He called Westbrook's behavior appalling, accused him of letting his team down when it mattered most, and openly scoffed at the idea of Russ reinventing himself as a role player.
The problem with Russ on the defensive end is his mental mistakes. He doesn't pay attention off the ball. He gambles way too much. He goes for steals.
For Stephen A., this wasn't about personal hate. It was about delivering a harsh truth to the basketball world. The game had passed Russ by, and if he didn't adapt, he wouldn't just fade, he'd vanish. But here's where it gets interesting. Not everyone agreed. Legends who played alongside or against Westbrook came to his defense. Former stars like Tracy McGrady and Chauncey Billups called him a once-in-a-generation competitor. Teammates from OKC to Washington vouched for him as one of the best locker room guys they'd ever known. Some even compared his fire to Michael Jordan's relentless spirit. So why the divide? Why do players still stand by Russ, while analysts tear him apart? The answer comes down to perspective. Teammates witness the grind. They see the effort, the intensity, the daily grind. Analysts, on the other hand, see the missed shots, the turnovers, the losses. And fans? They see the memes. They hear Westbrook. They scroll through YouTube compilations looping his worst plays until perception hardens into reality. Which brings us right back to Stephen A. Because whether you side with him or not, his voice shapes the entire narrative. When he says Russ might be out of a job, he's not just offering commentary. He's authoring the obituary of Westbrook's career in real time.
Good behavior, that's what I saw. And I don't know why this isn't being talked about enough, to be quite honest with you.
And in the NBA, perception often turns into prophecy. But here's where it gets truly volatile. Stephen A. didn't just mock Russ. He went after LeBron James, accusing him of playing a role in the downfall. That's betrayal at its peak. LeBron, the same superstar who vouched for Westbrook joining the Lakers, who publicly defended him on Twitter, was now being accused of quietly undermining him all along. And when Kyrie Irving trade rumors erupted the following summer, it only solidified the perception that Russ was disposable, even to the king. So let's get one thing straight. This isn't just a story about Westbrook being a free agent. It's about the politics that run the NBA. How stars protect their image at the expense of others.
So proud of his last name. He writes it everywhere. He writes it on everything. He tells everybody he walks around and says, I'm Westbrook. Westbrook, that's his last name. And I kind of sat there in shock, and it hit me like, damn, like I can no longer allow people, for example, Westbrook to me is now shaming, like it's shaming my name, it's my legacy for my...
How media voices amplify flaws until a legend becomes unrecognizable. And it's about what happens when a man who built his whole identity on defiance finds himself with no one left to defy. Here's the gut punch. Stephen A.'s prophecy came true. Russ is still unsigned. Teams have moved on. The league evolved without him. And despite all his fire, all his history, all the blood and sweat he poured onto the hardwood, the NBA has essentially said, we're done. So when Stephen A. mocks him now, it's not just commentary. It's the sound of a door slamming shut. It's the league telling one of its fiercest warriors, thanks for everything.
Russell Westbrook can't change. He's not going to be a good defender. He hasn't been the last 14 years, and that's not changing.
But we don't need you anymore. And that's why this moment matters. Because Russell Westbrook isn't just another player. He's a cautionary tale. For every star who believes their athleticism will last forever, for every icon who thinks willpower alone can fight time, Stephen A. Smith didn't just ridicule Russ. He exposed the league's cruel truth. Loyalty is conditional. Greatness is fleeting. And once the game decides you're done, your past doesn't save you. You can be mocked, dismissed, and left behind. Respect turns into ridicule.
Prove this season that he could take a lesser role. What are they saying he's going to be next year, Stephen A? They saying he possibly could actually be without a job.
It's the hypocrisy of the NBA laid bare. The pain of being unsigned isn't just about contracts. It's symbolic. When an MVP caliber player sits idle in free agency, the message couldn't be louder. You're not wanted anymore. And that's the deepest cut for Russell Westbrook. Because for more than a decade, teams didn't just want him. They needed him. He was the spark, the motor, the storm that kept franchises alive. From Oklahoma City to Washington, from Houston to the Lakers, every team took their shot with him, believing he could flip the script on their season. And for moments, he did. But now, with every day that passes in free agency, Westbrook's career looks less like a work in progress and more like a slow-motion ending. Stephen A. recognized it and turned it into a weapon. On live TV, he didn't just analyze Russ's performance. He attacked his conduct. Interview 1135, 1142. Inexcusable. Let that word sink in. This isn't about missed jumpers or bad defense. It's about accountability. It's about saying Westbrook crossed a line that effort alone can't fix. Defend. And when Stephen A. says that on NBA Countdown, it's not just an opinion.
Wife, even today, my mom said something about it today, and it affects them even going to games. I don't even want to bring my kids to the game because I don't want them to hear people calling their dad nicknames and out of their name.
It's a narrative that echoes through every debate show, every podcast, and every YouTube highlight reel. But here's where the hypocrisy really begins. While Stephen A. paints Russ as appalling on the court, some of the most respected voices in basketball have described a complete opposite version of him off the court. Teammates have called Westbrook one of the best locker room leaders they've ever had. Young players have shared stories of Russ inspiring them, pushing them to embrace their potential, delivering motivational speeches in practice that felt more like sermons and pep talks. But what dominates on ESPN? What racks up the views? Not mentorship, not sacrifice. It's the lowlights. The missed shots, the turnovers, the awkward airballs fans edit into endless TikToks. And the most painful part? Russ admitted it hurt his family more than it hurt him. His wife, Nina, revealed the harassment they faced. And Russ himself broke down after realizing that his son took pride in the Westbrook name, only for fans to twist it into an insult. Interview 1243, 1310. That's not sports banner anymore. That's humiliation bleeding into family life. And if you thought Stephen A. might tread lightly in that territory, think again. He doubled down, accusing Westbrook of refusing to evolve, calling him a man incapable of change. Interview 1323, 1328. This is where the expose turns ruthless. Because it's not just Stephen A. mocking Westbrook's decline. It's him practically announcing the end of his career. That's the power of media narrative. But to grasp how devastating that truly is, you have to remember who Russ once was. At his peak, Westbrook wasn't just a superstar. He was a show. James Harden admitted that Westbrook's MVP campaign might have been the single greatest season we've ever witnessed. Tracy McGrady once said he'd never seen anyone leave more of themselves on the floor every night. And players like Damian Lillard described him as the ultimate competitor, a man who approached every game like it was his last. Even rivals who clashed with him confessed that Westbrook's intensity was contagious. Some nicknamed him the Energizer Bunny of basketball. Others compared his ferocity directly to Michael Jordan's ruthless mindset. But fast forward to now, the same traits that built his legend, that stubbornness, that raw aggression, that refusal to compromise, have become his downfall. Defenses don't fear him anymore. Coaches no longer design systems around him. And front offices? They've grown tired of the noise. Colin Cowherd laid it out coldly. Westbrook is the least guarded guard in the entire NBA. Teams literally beg him to shoot. That's humiliation you can't recover from. And that shame doesn't just live on hardwood. It thrives online. Memes of his bricks. Twitter threads mocking his triple doubles as stat padding. Clips of missed dunks spread faster than any of his highlights ever did. In an era where perception dictates reality, Westbrook wasn't just losing games. He was losing the battle for his own narrative. And Stephen A., he became the loudest commander on that front line. When he called Russ's playoff attitude appalling, it wasn't just commentary. It was branding. When he said Russ can't change, it wasn't analysis. It was a televised obituary for his career. But here's the cruel irony. Fans loved it. Because outrage sells, laughter trends, and nothing blows up faster than watching a former superstar become the punchline. Meanwhile, Russ was left defending his dignity, fighting not just for a contract, but for his family's respect, battling a nickname, Westbrick, that turned a Hall of Fame resume into a running joke. fighting a narrative so powerful that even his achievements couldn't silence it. And that's where the hypocrisy hits full force. Because while the NBA media mocked him, his peers stood by him. Teammates like Bradley Beal praised his leadership. Younger players looked up to him as a role model. Legends respected his heart. But from NBA front offices, silence. No calls. No offers. So what does that say? That in today's league, respect doesn't guarantee survival. A player can give everything to the game, but once the narrative turns, the system lets him fade away on the free agency list. That's what makes Stephen A.'s ridicule sting so deeply. Because whether he realizes it or not, he's not just covering Westbrook's fall. He's accelerating it. His voice holds weight. His words echo into executive boardrooms. And when he says Russ might not find a job, general managers hear it. Fans repeat it, and soon that perception becomes reality. So the real question becomes, did Westbrook truly fail? Or was he failed by a system that chews up players, turns them into memes, and tosses them aside the moment they stop fitting the algorithm of modern basketball? Because make no mistake, this story isn't just about one man. It's about a toxic pattern in the NBA, one where stars are worshipped until they're inconvenient, then mocked until they disappear. And Russell Westbrook, once the heartbeat of the league, now stands as its most glaring casualty. From MVP to meme, the NBA's cold farewell. Russell Westbrook remains a free agent. That's not gossip. That's not speculation. That's the harsh truth staring him in the face as training camps continue and rosters fill without his name. Think about the symbolism. For over a decade, Westbrook was one of the fiercest competitors the league had ever seen. Coaches admired his energy. Players compared him to Jordan and Kobe. Fans once loved his fire. And now, the phone doesn't ring. Teams scroll past his name. His legacy, the triple-doubles, the MVP, the records, now buried under memes and missed shot compilations. Stephen A. Smith saw this coming. He warned the world with a harsh reality check. If Russ couldn't accept a smaller role, he might be out of the league entirely. Interview 1711-1720. Without a job. For words louder than any stat line. And here we are, months later, watching that prediction turn into reality. Stephen A. mocked him, sure, but behind the laughter was a warning that's now turned prophetic. And that's what makes this expose even darker than anyone ever imagined. The NBA doesn't care. Respect from peers doesn't matter. Loyalty to the sport doesn't matter. A Hall of Fame resume doesn't matter. If you can't shoot threes, can't fit into a system, can't adapt to the algorithms of modern basketball, you're gone. That's the story the media refuses to tell. But it's the one Russ is living every day. Because despite the decline, despite the narrative, Russell Westbrook is far from washed. He still brings that energy. He still plays with a motor that most 25-year-olds can't match. He still loves the game. But in the cold, data-driven reality of today's NBA, none of that counts. Colin Cowherd broke it down bluntly. Westbrook is the least guarded guard in the league. Teams literally step back and dare him to shoot. That level of humiliation is the final blow. Because when defenses laugh, the front offices follow. And yet, the hypocrisy is glaring. Ask the players, and they'll tell you Russ is one of the fiercest competitors of his era. Damian Lillard said he's never seen someone play harder night after night. Kobe himself praised his fire. Even rivals like Patrick Beverley, a man who once had open beef with Russ, admitted he respected his relentlessness. But ask executives? Silence. Ask coaches? Shrugs. Ask Stephen A? Clowning. That divide between respect and rejection is where Westbrook's story turns tragic. Because what the NBA is really saying is this: we respect you as a man, but not as a player. We love your legacy, but not enough to give you a roster spot. Thanks for everything. Now go home. And Russ knows it. That's why his words about his family cut so deep. Interview 1854-1910. That's not just a free agency story. That's a human being watching the sport he loves turn his name into a curse for his children. That's legacy turned into collateral damage. And through it all, Stephen A. doesn't waver. He says the things no one else will on TV. That Russ is too stubborn to change, that his athleticism has faded, that his decision-making is a liability, that his refusal to evolve has left him stranded. It's harsh, it's cruel, but it's also true because the NBA rewards adaptation. Look at LeBron James, who evolved from a slasher to a playmaker to a three-point threat. Look at Vince Carter, who extended his career by becoming a role player. Even Carmelo Anthony, once written off, clawed back into relevance by accepting a bench role. Westbrook never bent. He never compromised. And now he's paying the price. But here's the haunting truth. For all the jokes, the memes, the talk shows, Russ's story is bigger than him. It's about how the NBA discards its aging stars. One moment you're the face of the league. The next you're a meme. One moment you're MVP. The next you're Westbrook. And Stephen A. Smith, he's just a megaphone. He's voicing what the league whispers behind closed doors. Once you're no longer useful, you're disposable. So where does that leave Russ? In limbo, in exile, waiting for a phone call that may never come. Watching as his name trends not for his highlights, but for his failures. Fighting not for a max contract, but for dignity. And maybe that's the cruelest irony of all. Because for years, Russell Westbrook built his identity on defiance, refusing to back down, refusing to change, refusing to let anyone define him. But now, for the first time, the game itself has told him, you're done. And no matter how much he fights it, no matter how much he believes in himself, no matter how many legends still back him, the league has moved on. Stephen A. Smith mocked him for still being a free agent, but that mockery wasn't commentary, it was a eulogy. And unless something changes, unless Russ discovers a way to evolve unlike ever before, his NBA journey will end not with farewell tour, not with applause, not with respect, but with ridicule. And maybe that's the real heartbreak, because Russell Westbrook deserved more. But the NBA isn't built on emotion, it's built on survival. And in the ruthless survival game of today's league, Westbrook has been left behind. If you enjoyed watching this video, go ahead and click on any of the cards on your screen for more.